In Senate committee recommends review of revenue sharing formula. Now, this is from the Thisday newspaper, Devoe. I'll come to you for the first story of today, and we hear stories of the fact that it's been debated. The Senate committee have approved actually 30,000 naira minimum wage for workers. What do you have to say about this?
Yeah, it's quite a lengthy story on the good news that many of the servants within the civil service have been waiting for. And, this was a contention just before the election, whether this would be passed, but there were indications that it would be. Finally, along with the process, the Senate has sat and passed it.
Yeah.
Now, uh, now the discussion is around how it's going to be funded, because part one of it is to achieve
Yes.
the new amount. Part two, which is where the work is to be done, is how is this going to be funded, because this affects both federal and state governments. Now, the whole idea here that they're discussing, because what they raised up was the suggestion was
Yes.
that they should increase the revenue or review the revenue sharing formula.
That's right.
For those who don't know, the national revenue sharing formula is that the amount that the government shares to itself based on its income. So you have the federal government taking about 52%,
Yeah.
the state government's taking about 24%, and the LGA 20%. Now, if this is reviewed, the idea is that they give more to the states and the local governments, who will now have the capacity to be able to pay this new formula. Now, this is what we have always been touting about,
Yes.
fiscal federalism. Fiscal federalism speaks to who and where should the power or should the fund lie,
Exactly.
aka restructuring. So, up to this while, there's been so many contentious debates over restructuring. I remember, I think Atiku, it was one of his strong points to
Yeah.
restructure. Even APC at some points were discussing restructuring. And the issue with restructuring, because it was touted in so many ways that many people had a loose understanding of it, restructuring basically is however it's defined, and this is where the government begins to discuss it.
Yes.
Fiscal federalism. Now, restructuring can also mean how the minimum wage, where it comes to. It could also refer to infrastructure and who gets it.
Okay.
It could also refer to how to review the conclusive list. Sorry, the concurrent and the non-concurrent list. That speaks to the exclusive list,
Yes.
the powers that the federal government has, and the powers that the state government has. Now, this discussion is very wide and it involves as many people as possible. So we're expecting our National Assembly, both within the House and the Senate, to be able to give this the necessary time and attention that it requires. Because in the second story, many
So
of the issues.
that's linking it. Let me just
Right.
for emphasis and just for information, we have the two stories from this day news. Where the first one announces that the Senate has passed the 30,000 naira as national minimum wage, and the other then talks about the Senate committee recommending review of revenue sharing formula.
Yes.
And that was the developing story. And just to take a quote from the leader of the House, leader of the Senate, Ahmed Lawan, who the committee urged the ministers of finance and budget and national planning to, as a matter of urgency, compute and forward the actual amount required for the new minimum wage to the National Assembly so that it could be included in the 2019 budget. So they want it immediately to be affected immediately.
Right. Because that was the plan.
Yeah.
But you see, when we talk of budget performance, they've not even raised the fund. So now you're taking the bill up even higher. However, we knew this from the beginning. It wasn't a chicken and egg situation. We knew that we would get to this point. Now, in this meeting, there was a budget session where the Minister of Budget as well as the FIRS chairman were there, and they spoke to some of these facts. And in that session, they indicated that to be able to pay alongside the discussions as a recommendation on the revenue sharing formula, the budget minister was saying that there probably might be a 50% increase in VAT.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
While this was done, and they needed the House and the governors, who were also going to have their own meeting, to agree to this, and it's likely that they would, so that they'll be able to pay for this. Now, this was in order to meet up with the MTEF, that's the medium-term expenditure framework for 2019. Now, Fowler, that's the FIRS chair, also spoke and indicated that alongside the probable 50% increase in VAT, where people it's coming, there was a certainty that there would be an increase in company tax. okay, company income tax, as well as petroleum profit tax. So government right now is inching its way and trying to see how they can, in a way, move their revenues forward. That's the generated revenues forward, which might sound nice to be able to meet up with expectations, but I think there will be challenges in terms of us, all of us who are expected to pay this. And this is the heavy weight that many people are not looking at. I think there needs to be a roundtable, more roundtable discussions on this matter
Yes.
to see.
I was going to say, because there are many concerns around the minimum wage, chief of which is that with the 18,000 naira as a status quo, governors and states have not been able to pay this. And they have complained, not complained, but they've cried out to say that please do not increase it to 30,000 because we're already struggling with 18,000 naira.
Right.
And then, of course, you know the implications as well for private organizations as well, small businesses saying we actually cannot afford this. Is this, as nice as it sounds, as great as it sounds, that we're increasing the minimum wage, is it practical? Should it come at this time? Are there other things and other measures that should be put in place before increasing the minimum wage? Was this well thought out?
Well, what can I say, AY? We have very smart leaders in this country who decide to literally always heap the burden on the people. And that's why I say it requires a roundtable discussion, because I know there are many sections within our economy and our society that are going to kick against, especially the VAT increase.
Yes.
Because in some places, there are some taxes, especially on beer and some of these things, that some states kick against, yet they receive a sharing from it. So if you're going to take more from me, some people are going to raise issues that some states should not benefit from this. On the other hand, petroleum tax, it's always been an issue. Already, we've refused to float the naira. We're not paying the actual price. We're not paying. There's a subsidy that yet to be confirmed, and how it's going to be funded. So these are all the economic dynamics that we expect, not just the federal government, but the National Assembly especially, because they're the ones that set the tone, they set the policies within what we can bear to be able to meet up with these things. And hopefully within the next, hopefully, let's say once the 9th Assembly is inaugurated, we'll begin to see more heated debates in this area.
All right, thank you very much.
Sorry, a couple of things that are on my mind. I was just wondering, does this also mean an increase in the stipend paid to NYSC members?
Yeah, minimum wage. They would have to be paid. They would have to be paid minimum wage,
and then
the 10% on top as well.
The other thought is, if minimum wage is going up, it means everything is going up throughout the civil service.
Price of goods and
So
services.
I'm not just talking about, I mean other staff.
It runs all the way up.
So we're talking about a holistic,
a larger
from level 1, step 1.
A larger
It's madness.
wage
It's
bill
madness
for
when
the
you
federal
think about
government for an already bloated government.
Yeah.
So were we really thinking in the right direction when this happened?
On Monday, Cheta had mentioned that the deficit in the budget with regards to what was initially allocated for salaries would run up to over 1 trillion naira. That's what we're actually facing.
That's the kind of analysis that we need.
All right, let's go on to our next story. Nnamdi, I'll come to you for this, and I'll take the Vanguard report and the Guardian report because it's talking about elections and INEC halting certain collations. Now, Vanguard reports that court orders INEC to halt collation of Rivers election results, while the Guardian has it that court stops INEC from collating, declaring Bauchi gubernatorial results. Nnamdi, can you please take us?
Let's start from Rivers.
Okay, what I understand from this story is that for the Rivers situation, the African Action Congress approached the Federal High Court in Abuja to order the Independent National Electoral Commission to suspend the counting of results of the Rivers State Governorship and House of Assembly elections. The court, presided over by Justice Inyang Eko, said that the electoral body should maintain status quo ante. So basically, AAC has come to the court with an ex parte order, which means that they filed for this order in the absence of the other party. We all know that one of the tenets of justice in this part of the world is that you hear the other side, but sometimes you can get an ex parte order in the absence of the other party in order to maintain status quo, so nothing should change as it is. The things should stay as they stand. The reason for this is because in River State, as we all know, there were a lot of irregularities in the elections, right? And they had to suspend the process at some point. And there were plans that seemed to have been concluded for supplementary elections, right? Then suddenly out of the blue,
supplementary elections are meant to happen on Saturday, so just in 3 days' time.
But then INEC announces out of the blue that it intends to reconsider counting results that had already come in previously. So in this case, Mr. Biokbomabo Awara, I hope I've said that right, approached alongside African Action Congress, the court, to say, no, go ahead with your supplementary elections, don't do this collation of results as you intend. And in that light, the court agreed with him temporarily so that the suit will be determined. They ordered accelerated hearing of the suit and have decided that until INEC can come forward and show cause why they should be allowed to collate the results, that it will be suspended until then. It's the same situation that happened, only that in the case of Bauchi State, the ex parte order has already been granted. So in the first situation, it's breaking news. They filed, I think, yesterday.
Yes, so
they're going to hear the ex parte order, I believe, today. But in Bauchi State, in the case of the Bauchi State elections, before the same judge, Justice Nnamdi Awa-Kalu, in the Federal High Court, which sort of gives an indication of how he's going to rule in the River State elections. He granted the ex parte order, asking INEC to suspend status quo in Rivers, also in the Bauchi State guber and House of Assembly elections for a certain number of local governments.
All right. So what should we be looking at before Saturday? Do you think the runoff elections or the supplementary elections will hold on Saturday?
I mean, you can't really tell. The thing in Nigeria is, without casting any aspersions on the judiciary or the other honorable lawyers and judges who are part of a system that I represent as a lawyer myself.
I was going to mention that.
Yeah, I would say that it's very unpredictable at the moment. You can't really tell how a court is going to rule one way or the other, so we just have to wait and hear. The good thing about it, the encouraging news, is that they've ordered accelerated hearing, which means that in double quick time, we'll find out.
All right, thank you very much. Lagos, we will certainly be bringing you updates on that particular story with regards to how the court rules and what it means for Saturday's supplementary elections.
Harry Dixon sent this message on WhatsApp. Says 30,000 naira minimum wage for workers is nothing but a trap, as the federal government is set to increase VAT by 50%. The only solution to this issue is for the government to revamp the economy and all workers will be happy. Amai from Akoka says fiscal federalism, not feeding bottle federalism. Resource allocation should always be a front burner. My fear is that some states might find this new minimum wage as a challenge, even given the ability to pay. The devil is in the details, though. Eku, all this money you're sharing. Thank you, Amai.
EJ on the road says, good morning, Devoe and Nnamdi. I'm surprised that the government cannot cut the costs of governance. Instead, they want to task us the more. This is just selfishness and wickedness combined.
That's a fair point, you know.
And David here says, all these measures by the government to generate revenue to meet up for the minimum wage is looking ridiculous. With VAT increase and company tax increase, the common man to whom services are provided will definitely feel the bite and without doubt increase inflation. And if we consider history, the increase in inflation, you meant to say, will be inordinate reality to the actual wage increase. The government really does not appear to have thought this through. So sad that people bear the brunt of it all. One other thing, what happens to the high cost of governance?
People have asked that again and again.
Yes, will that affect the people in the House of Assembly? Will their salaries be cut? An ongoing question.
And the several aides and special assistants that we have.
I do think that maybe it's important for everyone to go and look at these details that someone has talked about the devil
in the details.
Before these are headlines and news stories. We should all go do our own background checks. So I can't claim to know exactly how they came up with their framework for instituting this new minimum wage. So.
All right. Let's keep the conversation going now. Still talking money and how much we can afford, especially for areas that are of utmost concern, which is health. One area like that, Nigeria must explore other sources outside the budget to effectively finance its health sector. Who said this? Ben Akabweze, the Director General of the Budget Office. He's speaking on this, the report carried on the Premium Times. He says, given this excuse, or rather, he says the explanation is why the government hasn't been able to afford proper health care in this country. And we know that we have a lot of issues, that are inimical to citizens, the ordinary citizens, from accessing basic health facilities. But please take us through the story.
I just want to first commend the budget minister. The DG of the budget office, Ben Akabweze. Though he's now more or less a politician, but he once was a bank MD, and I expect him to speak appropriately, which he has done.
Yes.
This article is one of the most instructive, practical that we have heard in a long time. Ben is saying that seeing that the office requirements within the health sector are more than the government can provide for, there needs to be a need to seek alternative ways of funding. I mean, it doesn't get better than that because government needs to come to that point where it recognizes its challenges and starts putting forth practical solutions. Now, here he's saying that, according to the AU agreement,
yes, in 2001.
yes, there was an agreement among the African countries that most governments would earmark about 15% to health, but since then, the Nigerian government has only done as high as 6%. So we're falling way behind. And challenges came up with the issues of the Basic Healthcare Fund, which was 1% of the Consolidated Revenue Fund, which obviously had issues when it came to funding the National Health Insurance Scheme, which also had issues when funding the National Primary Health Care, which is where all these hospitals scattered around the country. And the National Primary Health Care speaks to the clinics, especially where it speaks to giving birth, where people can give birth and get just simple consultation. So this is why, to a large extent, you have a lot of high maternal mortality because we don't have the basic facilities. It doesn't even mention tertiary healthcare, where it speaks to hospitals, their staff, doctors and nurses and equipment, which is they're all suffering and not meeting up to standard. Now, I think he's beginning the discussion, and I hope that he's able to drive this forward. Remember, he only represents an agency under the Ministry of Finance. Now, this discussion needs to be had with the National Assembly, because this is where we put our thinking caps on and start thinking fiscally, how do we intend to create the lifestyles for Nigerians that we promised them in their mandates. Remember, what's the mandate? The next level.
I like that you mentioned lifestyle, Devoe, and I want to hinge this to your conversation, your ongoing conversation, the fact that there's been a lot of emigration of doctors, professionals in the medical field out of the country seeking greener pastures. And this is a major issue because we feel like this climate does not support or encourage them, to thrive. But I mean, you see that most hospitals, especially private hospitals, have a high number of foreign experts, who are there. But how do you see the government bridging this gap and encouraging the doctors or medical professionals to come back?
Well, I'll just start by, in terms of funding, because the discussion always started with funding. And as you know, with all our social amenities, this expectation, this practical solution he's given needs to be had in education, in water resources, in transport, in basically all the social amenities. Now, he gave a recommendation here by stating that that government can have more resources to fund the health sector if they increase the tax on sugary beverages, alcohol, oh boy, tobacco, and other related items. This would increase the disease burden on the country. Logically, that makes sense. But the large extent of Nigerians, this is their little palliative. This is their little palliative. Why do you want to reduce my gogoro in the name of paying for? Yes, in the name of paying for health funds.
But
so
to be fair, how many people in rural areas can actually afford this items that he's mentioned? Apart from the things he's saying that they should increase the tax on, at the current price, how many people in rural areas who need access to the healthcare facility can afford these things? So when you talk about, just to talk about him saying, if they put the tax, it's a minor part of addressing the issue.
It's a minor, but I like I said, he can't have that conversation completely by himself. The private sector needs to step in. What you require is a policy enabling environment that allows the private sector and all these other forms of funding opportunities to be able to bridge that gap, whereby maybe you reduce their duties when they're importing. Maybe you give them some kind of tax rebates when they're making their investments. That's how you build sectors. So like I said, Ben's position is on point. And I expect other social amenity sectors to take a cue from this and move this country to the next level.
All right, thank you, Devoe. Solomon from Akoka says, we all knew funding this new minimum wage would be tough, but we all played to the gallery by asking, how much is 30K self? Now the reality has hit us. Methinks NLC should have raised us when we got to know how much the legislators were earning, but mom was the word. And that's the time we could have held the government accountable. Nigerians should prepare for more fruitless strikes and increase in tax. While at it, can the VAT increase not affect bank charges, please? Very, very important question.
Now, Big T says VAT government is giving with the right and taking with the left. The increase would cause inflation and rubbish whatever gains of salary increase.
All right, let's move on. We're still talking money and how sustainable our expenses are, or our plans are. Now, Sustainable Development Goals require $55 billion annually, says the federal government. I'll come to you, Nnamdi, for your analysis on this. Now, you know, there are 17 Sustainable Development Goals, an aspiration by the global community towards 2030 to include eradication of poverty, hunger, health, provide provision of good health, quality education, gender equality, clean water and sanitation, among other things. But this is coming from the Office of the Senior Special Assistant to the President on SDGs. But your thoughts on this and the amounts they are pegging for the actualization of goals?
So what has happened is that a delegation from the Civil Society Legislative Advocacy Center, CISLAC, which is the pressure group that's been very active of recent, went to see the senior technical advisor to the senior special assistant to the president on SDGs. His name is Bala Yunusa. And they stated that $55 billion is needed annually to sufficiently fund the SDGs. For those who don't know, the SDGs are it's a goal, they are goals that were set by the United Nations, I think in 2015, with the target being 2030. So that means we have about 11 years in which to accomplish what are quite groundbreaking, but difficult to achieve targets in all those areas you mentioned. There's 17 of them. And $55 billion a year, I wouldn't know exactly what the breakdown is.
It's about 1.9 trillion.
No, I mean, I don't know how they plan to allocate it across those 17 goals, but I can see how that much would be needed. The question now is, a lot of these discussions happen and then not a lot happens afterwards.
So it's the implementation that's the...
Not even just implementation. Okay, you say
stated.
you need $55 billion. Where are you going to find it? Because $55 billion is well in excess of Nigeria's external debt, just for instance, to give you an idea of the picture of how large that sum is. And in essence, what we really should be discussing is not exactly how much it's going to cost at this point, but whether Nigeria is actually going to meet the targets set by the SDGs in 2030. You know, I think that this discussion is a little hollow, and it's more about optics. You know, the CISLAC wants to be seen to be ahead of the curve in that discussion.
But it's necessary.
No, I do agree it's necessary.
Because if we're to get there, we have to have started since, you know.
We should have started about 4 years ago.
About 10 years ago.
And you know, and to be fair, I do know that there's a lot of work being done in the areas of SDGs in Nigeria, but it's not really quite enough. Something that they pointed out in this story is cleanup, which I believe would fall under health. The organic cleanup and saying that the government is not relenting in its efforts to ensure that the issue is addressed head on. I know that it has been something that is right at the top of the priority list of this government. So maybe that's something that's commendable.
Thank you, Nnamdi. Let's move on to this next story now. NIBSS, that is the Nigerian Interbank Settlement Systems, the Central Bank of Nigeria, commercial banks, and other key stakeholders. They come together and made a move really to address the point of sales transaction reversals that have been experienced by citizens. They said the reason is because of some the latest systems upgrade they're trying to achieve to reduce or rather increase the timeout period for POS transactions from 15 seconds to 45 seconds. They said the revamp and the upgrade will make the systems more seamless. But Nnamdi, do you see this as progressive? Or?
Hot button topic, and I think it's quite important. I think about sometime last week. There was I personally experienced, and I know lots of people experience POS failures.
I had an issue when I stepped into a fast food store after paying
You hadn't eaten their food.
I hadn't even got the food.
Okay, good.
You know all those places you get to and they say, oh God, please just put the card first. Let's perform the transaction before, you know, and that took my money.
I'm very lucky because very often I work out of a workstation coffee place called My Coffee.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to have to do this plug, but there's a
We
place.
delete it.
Okay, forget that. But
then
the idea is because I have a relationship with them.
All right. So what happened?
When the POS failed, I had no cash, and they were gracious enough to give me carry
Because they knew you.
over until this week.
The same is not for
The same is not for everyone. So what the story is saying is that POS use in Nigeria keeps rising. I think they said last year POS use doubled from the year before, and going forward into 2019, it's going to double again. Oh, sorry, let me read that. It said in 2018 we had 285 million POS transactions, which was the highest ever recorded
in Nigerian history
in this country.
Yes.
And they expect it will double in 2019 because the 2018 figure doubled the figure recorded in 2017. I don't want to question that logic, but let's go with it. So they're saying that in trying to upgrade capacity to allow for this expanded use of POS, there was a glitch because of other users in the value chain, right? And that this thing you've mentioned, which is increasing the failure, the time within which the transaction is cancelled, the timeout period from 15 to 45 seconds. 30 seconds is a lot of time on English. It would make a significant impact on the failure rate. So yes, I think it's encouraging. I think the payment solutions sector in Nigeria is fast moving and probably comparable with other parts of the world.
And I also feel like the telcos have a role to play in this because some of their services are accessed, I might be wrong, but through communication channels that have to be interfaced with this. Anyway,
all right. Yinka here on WhatsApp says, Devoe, what we have is under recovery and not subsidy. See, whatever happens with that VAT thingy, please don't increase price of beer. At least it's the only thing that keeps some of us calm with respect to Nigeria. Yinka is an adult.
People are speaking.
Let's prefer alcoholic beverages.
All right, Yinka, then Devoe, I really don't like when we see real issues and we deliberately shy away from it. Now the National Assembly is advising the sharing formula be reviewed. The question is, do the LGAs actually get their 20%? To the best of my knowledge, no. It goes to the fat cat state governments, which technically means the state governments get over 40%. Way forward, scrap LGAs and appoint administrators. At least we get to save local elections money, and no state government should complain we can't pay 30K.
All right. Thank you very much, Devoe. Analysis on this story very quickly from the Punch newspaper. Infrastructure deficit, bane of aviation sector growth. And that is a statement that was credited to the Minister of Aviation, who made the statement yesterday. He said that due to the dilapidated or absence of infrastructure in the industry, that the federal government continues to lose money and see a decline in best practices, or the aviation sector aligning with best practices. But your thoughts on this?
And he was also saying that the backwardness was due to the dilapidated and absence of infrastructure in the industry. Banga, a light bulb. Jeez. We didn't know this, but Hadi Serika was telling the people that came for this discussion in Abuja currently about the gap analysis and infrastructure. And he made another categorical statement that there's an absence of everything that makes aviation work. Man, I mean,
you see that?
Yeah, I mean, without proper airports, nothing's going to work in this country.
That's probably what it is. Remember the conversation that started about the instrument landing systems being subpar?
Yes.
And he's still using the cake instruments from World War II.
I actually, because he's a sharp man, and I really like. He's been very creative, although he's been held back in some instances. I expect the Minister of Aviation, just like the DG of Budget, to begin to make practical statements, practical moves and initiatives, especially at the federal government level, that will allow, once again, a policy-enabling environment so that the private sector who has these funds, either locally, domestically, or internationally, can come in and fill in the gap. I am embarrassed as a Nigerian, as a big brother of Africa, that small Ghana, has a 250 million modern airports, while we Nigerians have, fill in the gap.
All right, Devoe, thank you very much. Nnamdi, thank you very much. Thank you, Lagos, for being a part of today's discussion. Unfortunately, that's all we can take this morning. Keep your comments coming in. During Lagos Talks 981, we'll try to read some of them, so please stay tuned. We'll take on the discussion of the minimum wage even further at 9 a.m. But Devoe, thank you very much. You can follow Devoe at Devoe Okorie on Twitter, Nnamdi at Nnamdi AK on Twitter, and follow us collectively at Smooth 981 FM. You can catch up on today's episode on YouTube. We're on youtube.com/smooth981 FM.
Coming up next, Lagos, we talk sports.